three stages of awakening most people never reach. What if I told you that spiritual awakening isn't a single breakthrough moment? It's a predictable, three-stage neurological progression that 95% of seekers abandon before completion because they mistake the first stage for the destination. Your brain undergoes specific, measurable transformations during genuine awakening. Stage 1 feels profound. You experience initial insights and relief, but neuroscience reveals this is merely the beginning. Stages 2 and 3 involve deeper neural reorganization that most people never reach, because the middle stage feels like regression, not progress. This isn't mystical enlightenment nonsense. This is hard science. Researchers at Yale, contemplative neuroscientists studying advanced meditators, and psychologists mapping developmental stages have documented the exact progression. Dr. Willoughby Britain's research at Brown University on the dark night phenomenon reveals why most people quit during stage 2, the difficult middle phase that ancient texts warned about, but modern seekers aren't prepared for. Buddhist psychology detailed these stages as stream entry, path of seeing and fruition. Christian mystics describe purgation, illumination, and union. Sufi tradition maps stations and states. Every contemplative tradition independently discovered the same three-stage architecture. Stage 1 brings relief and insight. Stage 2 brings destabilization and doubt. Stage 3 brings integration and freedom. Most people experience stage 1, interpret it as complete awakening, then wonder why they slip back into suffering. I'm about to expose the 10 markers that reveal which stage you're actually in, and the specific practices required to progress through all three. Each technique targets a different aspect of the awakening process, ensuring you don't mistake preliminary insight for complete transformation. Your awakening isn't complete. Time to go deeper. Part 1. The initial insight recognition. You had a profound realization. Maybe that you're not your thoughts, or that everything is connected, or that the present moment is all there is. You felt liberated. This is stage 1. Initial awakening. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg's research on mystical experiences shows that initial insights correlate with temporary shifts in brain activity, particularly reduced default mode network function and increased parietal lobe activity. These are real neurological events, but they're temporary state changes, not permanent trait changes. This is technique number 1 out of 10, the initial insight recognition. Document your awakening experience in extreme detail. Date, circumstances, specific realizations, how long the clarity lasted, and when ordinary consciousness returned. Review this weekly for 12 consecutive weeks. Notice, did the insight persist or fade? Can you access that state voluntarily or only remember it? Rate your current access to that initial clarity on a 1 to 10 scale weekly. Initial awakenings are usually temporary state experiences, moments of clarity that arise then dissipate. Your brain briefly configured differently, giving you a glimpse, then return to baseline. You're distinguishing between temporary peak experiences and permanent structural transformation. Studies on meditation retreats show that 60% of participants report profound insights that diminish to baseline within 6 months. Initial awakening fades without consolidation. Start tracking insight persistence and watch yourself recognize that stage 1 was a glimpse, not a destination. The beginning, not the end. Part 2. The conceptual integration challenge. After initial insight, your mind tries to capture the experience in concepts, stories, and beliefs. You develop a spiritual identity. I'm awakened. I understand now. I see the truth. This is the trap. Psychologist John Wellwood coined spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid psychological work. Your ego co-opts awakening language, creating a spiritual self that's just another identity structure. Stage 1 becomes a cage of new beliefs rather than liberation from belief. This is technique number 2 out of 10, the conceptual integration challenge. For 30 consecutive days, practice radical honesty every time you think or say something spiritual about presence, consciousness, enlightenment, or awakening. Immediately ask, am I speaking from direct experience right now? Or am I repeating concepts? If concepts, remain silent. Document how often you're genuinely in the experience versus discussing the idea of the experience. Conceptual understanding feels like wisdom, but is actually a barrier. Your left hemisphere narrativizes the experience, creating a story about awakening that becomes another thought structure, obscuring actual awareness. You're distinguishing living insight from adopted belief systems. Research on expertise shows that People often mistake intellectual understanding for embodied mastery. Conceptual knowledge creates illusion of realization. Start distinguishing concepts from direct experience and watch spiritual identity dissolve as you recognize you've been thinking about awakening, not being it. Part 3. The Dark Night Navigation Stitch begins when your initial insights destabilize without providing new stability. You feel worse than before, awakening, anxious, meaningless, or dark. This is the dark night, and it's where most people quit. Psychologist Willoughby Britton's research documents that 60% of long-term meditators experience challenging psychological states: depersonalization, meaninglessness, anxiety, or depression as dismantling occurs before reorganization completes. This isn't pathology, it's transition. This is technique number 3 out of 10, the Dark Night Navigation. If you're experiencing post-awakening difficulty, recognize it as stage 2, not failure. Create a dark night journal where you document disorientation, loss of meaning, anxiety, or emptiness. Write daily for 60 consecutive days minimum. Research historical accounts of dark nights. St. John of the Cross. Buddhist Dukkha to recognize you're in a documented developmental stage. Your brain is reorganizing. Old structures are dissolving faster than new ones are consolidating. The destabilization is necessary, not problematic. You're preventing premature abandonment by recognizing difficulty as progress, not regression. The dark night is the middle of the process, not a sign you're doing it wrong. Studies show that meditators who continue through difficult phases emerge with more stable transformation than those who quit. The dark night precedes integration. Start recognizing dark night is necessary. Stage 2, and watch your relationship to difficulty shift from something's wrong to something's transforming. Part 4. The subtle clinging detection. You're attached to awakening itself. You want to feel enlightened, be seen as spiritual, maintain a special state. This subtle grasping prevents deeper letting go required for stage 3. Buddhist psychology identifies spiritual materialism, using awakening as another achievement for the ego. As long as you're trying to be awakened, you're reinforcing the separate self that awakening dissolves. The grasping for freedom is itself bondage. This is technique number 4 out of 10, the subtle clinging detection. Spend 15 minutes daily for 45 consecutive days in ruthless self-examination. What am I getting from my spiritual identity? How am I using awakening to feel special? What would I lose if I stopped being spiritual? Write answers honestly. Explore in every way you're using awakening as psychological security or social status. True awakening has no one to be awakened. It's the dissolution of the seeker, not the achievement of the seeker. As long as you're invested in being awakened, there's still a you trying to attain something. You're exposing and releasing the final, subtle forms of self-grasping. Research on ego development shows that spiritual ego is often more defended than ordinary ego. The spiritual identity becomes the last fortress. Start detecting subtle spiritual clinging and watch it dissolve as you recognize how you're still using awakening as a project for a self. Part 5. The ordinariness acceptance. Protocol stage 3. Awakening doesn't feel special. It feels completely ordinary, so ordinary that you might think you've lost something. This is actually the sign of genuine integration. Zen Master Shunryu Suzuki said enlightenment is accident. Practice makes you accident prone. Stage 3 is when the extraordinary becomes so integrated it's no longer distinct from daily life. There's no one having awakening experiences, there's just life happening. This is technique number 5 out of 10, the ordinariness acceptance protocol. For 90 consecutive days, deliberately release all attempts to feel special, have peak experiences, or maintain altered states. Instead, bring complete presence to completely ordinary activities: washing dishes, walking, eating, working. Practice finding the same depth in the mundane as you sought in meditation. Notice when you're craving extraordinary experiences, this craving itself is the obstacle. Stage 3 integration means awakening infuses ordinary life. Rather than existing as separate special states, your brain stops distinguishing between spiritual practice and regular life. All moments become equally saturated with awareness. You're training the recognition that the sacred isn't elsewhere. Studies on long-term practitioners show reduced distinction between meditation and daily life brain states. The practice becomes continuous, not compartmentalized. Start finding awakening in ordinariness and watch the search end as you recognize it was always here, in what you dismissed as mundane. Part 6. The psychological shadow in aggressionacum doesn't bypass psychological work. It makes it more necessary. Unprocessed trauma, repressed emotions, and denied aspects of self don't disappear with initial insight. They must be integrated for Stage 3 completion. Psychologist Jack Kornfield's research on meditation teachers found significant psychological dysfunction despite advanced practice. Spiritual attainment doesn't automatically heal psychological wounds. It can actually deepen denial if used as escape from emotional work. This is technique number 6 out of 10. The psychological shadow. Integration. Parallel to contemplative practice. Engage in psychological work, therapy, shadow work, or emotional processing. Spend 60 minutes weekly for 50 to consecutive weeks deliberately exploring repressed emotions, unhealed traumas, and disowned personality aspects. Use modalities like psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, or internal family systems. Document how spiritual practice and psychological work inform each other. Awakening reveals the nature of consciousness. Psychological work heals the content of consciousness. Both are necessary. Your brain needs both neural reorganization through contemplative practice and emotional processing through therapeutic work. You're integrating transcendence with humanity, rather than using transcendence to bypass humanity. Research shows that meditators with unprocessed trauma show attenuated practice benefits. Psychological work removes obstacles to realization. Start integrating psychological shadow work and watch awakening deepen as you stop using spirituality to avoid emotional healing. Part 7. The effortless action. Cultivation. Stage 3 manifests as effortless effort action, arising spontaneously from awareness rather than from ego striving. The doer dissolves. Things get done through you, not by you. Neuroscience research on flow states shows reduced prefrontal cortex activity. The executive self quiets, allowing action without self-conscious control. Taoist Wu Wei and Hindu Karma Yoga both describe this state where action happens without a sense of separate actor. This is technique number 7 out of 10. The effortless action. Cultivation for 75 consecutive days. Practice releasing control during daily activities. Notice when you're forcing, controlling, or efforting. Pause, ask, what wants to happen naturally? Allow action to emerge rather than pushing it. Document the difference between forced action and spontaneous action, how they feel, their ease, and their effectiveness. Notice how much of your exhaustion comes from the effort of being someone doing something. When identification with separate self dissolves, actions arise from awareness itself rather than from a doer executing a plan. You're not becoming passive, you're discovering action without actor, effort without strain. The controller relaxes. Life lives itself through this organism. Studies on highly skilled performers show they describe peak performance as it does itself, reduced. Self-consciousness allows superior function. Start releasing control and allowing action and watch effortlessness emerge as the doer stops interfering with the doing. Part 8. The non-dual recognition. Stabilization. You glimpse non-duality, the collapse of subject-object split, but glimpses aren't stability. Stage 3 requires this recognition to become your continuous baseline, not an occasional peak. Neuroscientist Zoran Josipovic's research on advanced practitioners shows persistent changes in brain networks. The self-referential network and task-positive network become integrated rather than antagonistic. Non-dual awareness isn't a state you access. It's the ground you never leave. This is technique number 8 out of 10. The non-dual recognition stabilization. Practice continuous non-dual inquiry for 120 consecutive days. Throughout your day, investigate, is there actually a boundary between awareness and what I'm aware of? Is there truly a separate experiencer behind experience? Don't answer conceptually, look directly at present experience. Notice that there's experiencing without an experiencer being findable. Return to this investigation 20 times daily. Initial non-dual glimpses are temporary dissolutions of the subject-object structure. Stabilization means this recognition persists. You stop losing it and needing to find it again. You're training your nervous system to maintain non-dual recognition as baseline rather than retreating into dualistic perception. Research shows that thousands of hours of practice create trait level changes. Temporary states become permanent traits through sustained recognition. Start continuous non-dual inquiry and watch glimpses stabilize into unbroken recognition that never gets lost because it's what you are. Part 9. The compassion consequence emergency genoon. Stage 3 awakening naturally generates compassion not as a moral choice, but as an automatic consequence of recognizing you and others as expressions of the same consciousness. Neuroscientist Richard Davidson's research on compassion meditation shows that it activates brain regions associated with empathy and reduces self-other distinction. True awakening isn't solipsistic recognizing. No self paradoxically increases connection, because the boundaries creating separation disappear. This is technique number 9 out of 10. The compassion consequence. Emergence for 100 consecutive days. Practice seeing yourself and others. When interacting with anyone, recognize this is also me. Appearing is another form. When someone suffers, feel it as your suffering. When someone succeeds, feel it as your success. Document how this recognition affects behavior. Does compassion arise naturally or remain effortful? If effortful, the recognition isn't yet stabilized. When you genuinely recognize others as alternative expressions of the same awareness, harming them becomes as nonsensical as harming your own hand. Compassion isn't cultivated, it's revealed as the natural response to seeing truly. You're distinguishing conceptual compassion from the automatic compassion that emerges from realized non-separation. Studies show that advanced practitioners demonstrate spontaneous prosocial behavior. Compassion becomes automatic, not deliberate. Start recognizing yourself in others and watch compassion emerge naturally as the inevitable consequence of seeing through separations. Illusion. Part 10. The Integration Verification Assessment is something that will blow your mind. You can objectively assess your stage by examining how awakening affects daily life, not by evaluating meditation experiences. Psychologist Ken Wilber's developmental models and Shinzen Young's progress mapping both emphasize that genuine realization manifests in behavior, relationships, and life functioning, not in spiritual experiences or states. This is technique number 10 out of 10, the Integration Verification Assessment. Every 90 days, conduct a comprehensive integration audit using these criteria. 1. Equanimity. How do you respond to difficulty? 2. Availability. How present are you in relationships? 3. Ethics. Do you harm others through unconscious action? 4. Ordinariness. Has the need for special states decreased? 5. Compassion. Do you naturally act for others' welfare? Rate each 1 to 10. Track trends across multiple assessments. If ratings aren't steadily improving, you're having experiences, but not integrating realization. Awakening that doesn't change how you live isn't awakening, it's spiritual entertainment. Your brain's transformation must manifest in transformed behavior and relationships. You're implementing objective assessment that distinguishes genuine integration from spiritual bypassing. Research on development shows that self-reported enlightenment often conflicts with behavioral assessment. Integration is visible in life, not claims. Start conducting integration audits and watch honest assessment reveal whether you're truly progressing through all 3 stages or stuck in stage 1. Closing. These 10 markers aren't just assessment tools. They're the roadmap through all 3 awakening stages that most people never complete. You're not failing if you're in stage 2 darkness or recognizing your attachment to spiritual identity. You're progressing through documented developmental stages. Initial insight recognition reveals you've begun. Conceptual integration challenge shows you're moving beyond beliefs. Dark night navigation normalizes the difficult middle. Subtle clinging detection exposes remaining grasping. Ordinariness acceptance protocol marks stage 3 beginning. Psychological shadow integration prevents bypassing. Effortless action cultivation demonstrates doer dissolution. Non-dual recognition stabilization creates continuous baseline. Compassion consequence emergence validates realization. Integration verification assessment provides objective progress tracking. Ancient contemplatives map these stages through direct experience. Buddhist path maps detailed the progression. Christian mystical theology outline purgation through union. Sufis describe stations and states. They all independently discovered that awakening is a 3-stage process: initial insight, destabilizing transition, and integrated embodiment. Modern contemplative neuroscience confirms their maps with brain imaging. Stage 1 shows temporary network reconfigurations. Stage 2 shows destabilization patterns. Stage 3 shows permanent structural changes and network integration. Most seekers experience stage 1, mistake it for completion, then either rest in initial insight or abandon practice during stage 2 difficulty. Neither completes the journey. Your transformation doesn't start tomorrow or next week. It starts the moment you honestly assess which stage you're actually in.